these projects. We may not all agree on which part of the city to work on. We may not all agree on which particular street and whether it's the right street to be done. But we are agreeing that we're going to be utilizing these principles. Because you know what? Bigger is not always better. Detroit's a classic example of that. It is about the fact that you're going to be looking at, if there's a particular street, we may actually be able to reduce the amount of asphalt we're putting on that particular street. We may actually be able to place a street tree on a particular street. We may be able to do some things that are going to create a stronger sense of place and add some value to your community. Whether or not, as Commissioner Maxwell said, whether it adds property value or doesn't, I'm not going into that discussion, and I don't think any of you necessarily want to. We can all, speculate in those areas, but I think it's about the image that you're going to portray. And I think what makes it easy is whether people like or dislike this, you've committed as a team, which I would hope you would do, is you would commit and say, we want to agree to these principles. As to whether or not this bond referendum is even anything you ever like, the fact that your projects moving forward should involve those principles. And from that, I know there are a lot of different words that each of you could use to add into this mix, and you can make it convoluted, you can make it complicated. I don't want you to do that. Let's use the KISS principle. Let's keep it simple. Let's find a way to make something work. And one thing that's really tough, and I can tell you, having been a city manager in 3 cities and having been a commissioner, looking through that, it's not always easy to be a leader. It's not always easy to sit up here. And honestly, the average person that's out within your city, they have no idea what you or I or anybody really does at times. They want to know that they're at least seeing the right things happen. The right things are not right for everyone, but generally speaking, they're saying from the survey, you're doing the right things. They like what they see. Let's build on that and let's carry those things forward. So from that would be 2 simple steps. 1, you would have a resolution for the language. You need to deal with that, and you should deal with that in a very soon upcoming public meeting. The second would be to, at the same time, I would hope you would take the same resolution, adopt that as your next item of agenda, so that when you're showing that commitment, it then makes the city manager and staff's ability to move forward on this much easier because they now have their marching orders. Jamie then knows when he's working what he's actually going to be saying. And that would be what I would recommend that you look at.
City manager, any comments?
Yeah. The intent of pulling this together was to try to give you some data to consider. It's not perfect data, so that you could look at this issue that, in talking to Todd, and we started to go over with the 2 ballot dates coming up, would it be more appropriate to go in November or March? And that was the intent behind this survey or poll. It wasn't really trying to cause any divisions among the commission. It was just something for y'all to consider as policymakers. Because at the end of the day, you always are in the hot seat in the spotlight, and I want to try to bring data to you. And hopefully this was useful. I think what Todd talked about, the November ballot being the best one, based on what we see, I would tend to agree and encourage you to consider that. We're prepared to go ahead and do these 2 resolutions and go ahead and schedule as soon as possible for you to consider at your regular commission meetings and to get this on the ballot.
Commissioner McBoyd?
Anybody else want to comment?
You've got the floor.
What concerns me about what I'm hearing is it sounds a lot like half of a 2-part product process. When you sell something, there's 2 parts to it. One is the product that you're selling, and the other is the sales pitch. And usually you develop the product first, and if you're lucky, it's a good product. The sales pitch it sells itself. You don't need to do much of a sales pitch for it. What I'm feeling here is discussions about what words we need to choose to put on our ballot language. We have 75 words that you can do when you're putting on an item on the election, on the ballot. This sounds a little bit like, well, let's do some research to figure out what are the right words that'll make this go through. And I understand the concept that there has to be a sales process because we're asking people to significantly add to their ad valorem taxes. They're not taxes, they're something else, but to the average person, it's an additional check that you write to the city. We have an ask, and it's a pretty big one. So you need a sales pitch. But in theory, especially because everybody in the city agrees that we ought to do something about the roads, or that there's a problem with the roads. I don't know whether they agree that we should do something about it, but they certainly agree that there's a problem. What's the product? This is why the bond issue failed the last time, because we did not spell out clearly what the product is. And I feel like we're going down exactly the same darn track where we're saying, let's figure out how we can sell this thing. And we can't sell it because we're the city. Instead of what I would think would be an appropriate process for dealing with this is you say, you know what, we need public input. You need to have charrettes. You need to have some method of bringing people together and say, hey, if we're going to tear up the roads and rebuild them from scratch, you have enormous opportunity to decide what your city looks like. You don't have to just put it back together the way it was. You can do other things. You can think about what you want roads to do in your community. That should be a very rich and robust community discussion. And once that has happened and up organically bubbles clear sense of, yes, we have a problem, and yes, we have some agreement of what the scope of that solution should look like or include, then you don't need to do the sales pitch. You have a whole bunch of people who've been involved in figuring out what the product is, and they themselves, they'll sell it to their friends and themselves and their neighbors and whatnot. So it bothers me that we're talking about trying to figure out what's the best way to, put it on this election or that election, or what words, or how should we sell this. That I have a very high level of discomfort with it, and particularly when we're doing polling that very clearly doesn't reach the whole community. And remember, the sales pitch is to the voters, but the folks writing the checks is everybody in the community. That's really where you need to reach out to and figure out what people want to do.
I just want to say one thing in response to Commissioner McBoyd. You know, when I made a mention before about not care, it wasn't that I don't care about the polls, I just wanted to clarify that for you. What I was trying to say is that we're talking about, well, first of all, when we were dealing with infrastructure the last time around for the bond referendum, City Manager, how many meetings did we have? I know Pam Lopez.
57.
We had 57 meetings, community meetings. We had 57 meetings. Commission meetings, community meetings, neighborhood association meetings, Compass meetings. We had 57 meetings. Quiet, please. And it went to all different organizations all throughout the city in multiple places with numerous staff, and they were noticed meetings, by the way. Either way, I mean, don't you guys every day have someone coming up to you, talking to you about what are you going to do to fix the streets? What are you going to do to fix the sidewalks? And I resent the fact that there's some sort of, people think there's some sort of big giant pot of money sitting there to pay for the restoration. Do you think we would sit here and not fix the streets if there was? We need a funding source to fix the streets. We know we need to fix the streets. We know the streets were neglected for a long period of time. And we know we just went through this election cycle, and you guys will go through it in your next election cycle. Everybody coming to you screaming, potholes, potholes. What are you going to do about the potholes? The news crews carrying potholes. There's a problem here. And we need to find a funding source to do it. Not everybody wants to pay for it. That's typical. Regardless, it's still a problem. And it's still a problem that a majority of people are going to want fixed. And they look to us to fix them. So regardless of whether we like the poll, the results of the poll, not of the poll, when we talked, like I said, it wasn't that I didn't like the poll, to say, well, we spent money on that. The couple of $1,000s we spent on that has already cost us $9 million of unaddressed infrastructure problems in the last year or 2 years?
2 years.
2 years. So a couple of grand to figure out how we're going to find the funding for something that's already cost us $9 million in neglect in a 2-year period is just, it's ticking. Tick, 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 tick. Next it'll be 10 million, 11 million, 12 million. It doesn't matter what you think personally about it. There is a problem and it needs a solution. The city doesn't have the money, and we need to find a funding source for it. Simple. Not everybody wants to pay for it, but everybody wants it fixed. Correct? So we can be the, what is the doll that used to have when you punched it, it fell over and you got back up again? What are those things called?
We will all.
What was it?
We will
Wobbles. Yeah, so, we can't fall down on this. It's our responsibility as public servants to provide the best level of public safety. And damaged roads and potholes and infrastructure problems are a problem to public safety. It should have been taken care of. It wasn't. It's our responsibility to fix it and find the funding options for it. We need to do something about it, and I agree. I think that we should unanimously, although at least all know and recognize there's a problem here, and we have to find a funding source. And unless anybody plans to open up their big, ginormous lotto winnings, or bank accounts that they have, or vaults that they may have in their home to pay for it themselves, we have to find a way to pay for it. That's the grown-up solution. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not there's a viable problem that needs to be fixed. So we can bring out all the political hoo-ha and theories and opinions and whatever. Problem needs to be solved. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Just for everybody's listening pleasure, at this current rate is costing us $379,167 a month not to deal with this issue. And the number's going to get better, or bigger, excuse me, as time marches on if we do nothing. Because these numbers will exponentially grow. The obstructionist attitude of some folks on this dais and some of the people in the community needs to stop. We need to move forward.
Let's just stay forward with the topics, please. Vice
That
Mayor.
is the topic.
Let's just stick with the agenda item, please.
Okay, so what's the action item if anything these kind of this?
There is no action item, it's a discussion, correct? Well, you need consensus from us whether or not.
Because of the timeframes involved with getting something on the November ballot, we would like to get a sense from the commission if y'all would like us to bring forward a resolution for consideration on the ballot language, so that we can start that process with the supervisor.
Okay. Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you. I don't think that any of us up here needed a survey to tell us that most of the people on all sides of the issues want the roads fixed here in Lake Worth. I think anyone that has reached out and spoken to their constituents knows that that's the case. I'm disappointed to hear the mayor say things like conspiracy theory and political hoo-ha to refer to her fellow commissioners just trying to determine the validity of a study that is going to determine the action that we take in the future. I think that's a really unfortunate position, frankly. I do appreciate, City Manager, your attempt to bring us data. However, as Commissioner McVoy pointed out, this data is not strong data. It's not data to make a decision on. Mr. Mowry, Commissioner Mowry, I heard you twice during your presentation. Once you made the statement that Clearview is the best data and the best in the business, and then later on, Clearview is the #1 survey data in the nation. That feels.
Not the nation.
Pardon?
Not the nation. Use your favorite Q.
I wrote it down as you said it, but it all sounds sales pitchy. And really, I think in the case of, I can only speak for myself, but I'm just trying to determine the validity of survey data that's being presented before us. It's necessary, it's relevant, and I think it's totally valid that we would be here questioning it. That's why we're here today. This is a workshop so that we can work on these things. Looking back at the previous bond issue where I was not a commissioner, I was a resident of the city, there may or may not have been 57 public meetings. I attended one of those, and what I witnessed was probably 80% of a neighborhood association meeting being the side that was for the bond, and then the meeting, not officially, but everyone left the meeting before the no side was given the option to present their side of the issue. And then when the issue came to a vote, it failed by 26 votes, 27 votes, something like that. And I would think that any people, but I may be pointing to the majority in particular, might look back at that and say, hey, had we given these meetings fair weight to both sides, could we perhaps have reached a resolve in that? And maybe we wouldn't be $9 million further in the hole however many years later if we had just taken the time, instead of saying conspiracy theory and political hoo-ha, and just listened to the other side for a change. Maybe you would have reached a resolve that would have gotten you those 30 votes or whatever it was that you needed. Thank you.
I wasn't, just to clarify, I wasn't referring to the commissioner sitting up here on the dais. I was talking about making it an issue. I wasn't saying it was something stemming from the commissioner, so no disrespect, but it didn't have anything to do with that. I'm saying about people saying, well, there were people out on the street that were saying it was going to cost them thousands and thousands of dollars when actually it was $100 or $200. That's what I was talking about, conspiracy, just to clarify. And there was misinformation that was being talked about, so that wasn't, you shouldn't be offended.
From both sides.
From all sides. You know, miscommunication happens everywhere because everyone feels that they have to take a side, and the only side that they should be on is fixing the stinking streets. Commissioner Marceau?
Yeah, I just want to weigh in real quick. First of all, I want to thank staff, and I want to thank you. I don't have a problem with your poll, because your poll says exactly what I'm hearing from the people for the last 2.5 years. And again, 2.5 years ago, we would have saved ourselves $9 million. And for the last 2.5 years, I haven't heard anyone else, some of the complaints that are coming from the dais tonight. No one has stepped up to do anything on behalf of the problems we've had for 2.5 years. So I want to thank the city manager for moving this forward, and staff. And if you take the time to meet with staff, you'll see exactly what the people have said, because staff has noted that. I've been out personally with staff in the different neighborhoods in all the districts, identifying worst first and some of the big issues, some of the street calming in on the west side, in Mr. McVoy's districts. So we have heard from the people, whether we had 57 meetings or we had 5 meetings, we had very good meetings, a lot of diversity in those meetings. And again, when we ran for re-election, there was not one candidate that was running against us that did not say they would support a bond. So the people have spoken. Your information is point on. As far as what I'm hearing, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people, and again, like the mayor said, there is not one person that we talk to on a daily basis that does not want to fix the streets, and they're willing to pay for it. And as far as your data, as far as landline versus cell phone, I have a cell phone. I don't have a landline, but I also don't have a home security system where you need a landline. And I look at the data, the landline are older, more mature people in the city. They're homeowners. They've probably been here for a long, long time, and they care about their city. You know, we've gone back and forth with, you know, homeowners versus renters, where renters don't necessarily take the value in their properties as much as a homeowner. So, you know, when I look at that data, I'm looking at it differently. I'm looking at it as a longer resident vested in their community. Some of the new millennials that are coming in, they're on the cell phone, and like you said, they don't want to spend as much time. And to be honest with you, when I pick up the cell phone and it's a robocall or something, I tend to hang it up. When I'm at my store and it's a landline and I get a robocall, I tend to pick it up and listen to it. So again, you know, I think your data is right, point on, and again, thanks staff. And my recommendation is to have staff move forward and get it on the November ballot.
I would like, number one, for us to, I think, send a message that we're gonna take care of our obligations, you know, and stand unanimously. We can go through the details of what the amounts and the details of what's good in the projects, and we can go through that, have plenty of meetings about that, but I think we need to send a message to the people of the city that we're gonna take and be responsible to fix the roadways. I mean, I think we can stand together on that issue, and then we can fine-tune everything else as we go along in regards to it, but at least stand together and say, yes, we all agree that the streets need to get fixed. And we have to find a funding option for that. I think that's fair, Vice Mayor.
You know, you're absolutely right, Mayor. The streets are not gonna fix themselves. And if we don't have some sort of a bond measure, the roads will never be repaired. We've all heard the expression, Rome's burning and we're sitting around picking out the color of the hose. We all know that we need to put out the fire. But there are some among us who refuse to put out the fire. And they will use the opportunity to find a conspiracy in what we're trying to do, to pick apart the methodology of how the poll was done, to criticize and say, you know, there've been political trickery or whatever that happened in the last round. We've got to get beyond that, okay? If you don't want the roads fixed, if you can't support the idea of the taxpayers ultimately having to dip into their pockets, which unfortunately is the case, then just say it that way. Just come out and say it that way and save us all the grief and the aggravation of going through the drama and the grandstanding. But we must move forward. If we have to do this, you know, if we do move forward and it ends up being a simple majority that moves us forward, then so be it. But the time of talking is over. You know, for 15 years, I've seen no material road program, and we talked about this earlier in the meeting about how if you use the point structure, how the roads deteriorate over. We've got to do something, and I quite frankly am tired of talking about it. I think it's time to ask staff to move forward and bring something to us to vote on so we can move forward.
Commissioner Boyd?
Thank you. I find it interesting that we're throwing around numbers. First, I'd like to take a little umbrage that some of the commissioners are trying to phrase things that in a rather black and white way, that if you aren't with us, you're against us, and you're again fixing the roads, and you're, you know, some sort of Neanderthal or something or other. I don't know. I don't think anybody has said that they're against fixing the roads. What people are saying is perhaps it's not a bad idea to learn from past experience. And the problem and the feeling in the community of the need to fix the roads was just as strong 2 years ago as it is now. Maybe it's gotten, you know, 5% stronger because we got a few more potholes. But it was very strong at that point. So the fact that the vote came out 50-50 should have been a screaming message to us that whatever we did to get public input and public buy-in and present a plan, present a product that everybody looks at and says, wow, that's a great solution to a problem that we all agree we have. By gum, here's my checkbook, let's go. It should have passed 90%. And what it says is we didn't present people with a clear and community-developed product that fixed the problem. So when you came around to ask them for how do you fund it, they said, wait a minute, don't talk to us about how to fund it. That has separate issues. I want to know what I'm buying. And I want to be a part of that process of figuring out what I'm buying. And so what you're hearing from some of the commissioners up here is a question to the rest of the commission, is what do you propose as a process to get community involvement and get that community buy-in so that you don't have to worry about what language goes on the ballot. If you just write 2 words, vote for the bond, it'll pass because you have such a strong swell of support for the solution that you've developed with the community that it'll pass itself.
City Manager?
What do you, I asked that question to my colleagues, what do you propose as a process?
In all due respect, Commissioner, I'm astounded by the political naivete of that. And the last bond issue keeps being brought up. It was audacious to ask for $63.5 million. It was audacious for the city to do that. It included things that were targets that hindsight will give you some perspective that has nothing to do with what's in the program as much as people didn't want certain things in the program. It was the Boutwell Road Park of Commerce. That shouldn't have been in the ballot, that a lot of people agreed in the program. There was the neighborhood enhancements, which were going to be tailored to each district based on what the neighborhoods were going to come up with, be it traffic calming or entranceway features. You know, that was, what, a couple of $1 million.
$800,000.
It was $800,000 a district. That shouldn't have been in there. There wasn't citizen oversight, I heard that. It was too big. I heard that repeatedly. Why don't you do half of it now, trust us, and we'll do the other half later. So those issues are very much different than the stripped down version. And unfortunately, I think we just really glossed over the language in the ballot itself. The ballot question that was put in the poll. It's very stripped down. It has none of that. It's all just roads. It's potholes, it's road repairs, it's that. There's nothing else in there. And it was, 40 million was an amount that, based on a lot of discussion about the other bond issue being too big to swallow, it was in that sweet spot. That's why we did 40 and 50 million. And you can see it drops off considerably. The data would give you the indication that there's a significant difference between 50 and 40. That's kind of a sweet spot. Those are things that people going to the polls feel comfortable about. To get people to come to charrettes continuously, I'll be honest with you, in this city, we do meetings, we do things, and we're going to go through that process. It's important to talk about what the work list is going to be, but it's the same people. It's the same questions. I think in that ballot language, we've eliminated a lot of the angst. So, present company included, we've eliminated a lot of the angst about some of the things that we've heard in the last go-round. To come within 24 votes was pretty amazing. And to your point, Commissioner, I was dumbfounded at a moment that this city could have pulled together and really had a let's pull ourselves up by the bootstrap moment and build community and accomplishment and fix our house, turned into a argument. That's my naivete in coming to this. I thought this was something that the community would really latch onto. So that was kind of a learning experience for me in a lot of ways. I don't think you'll get 90% in this city for anything. And that's what I meant when I say political naivete.
Quiet in the chambers, please. Quiet in the chambers, please.
So part of the difficulties is, and the infrastructure that the city's responsible for is very much a meat and potatoes set of issues. We have streets that are abysmal. We have facilities that should have been torn down that staff are currently working in. We maybe have become a little bit of a victim that somehow we're this successful city, somehow magically after 4 or 5 years. We're not. We're struggling. We financially still struggle. We try to do things, and there's a lot of things that need to be done. This is an opportunity for this city to pull itself by its bootstraps and to really do the right thing and fix what's our responsibility, what's your responsibility. And I would hope that if this goes forward, that I don't have a situation again where either all of you guys need to be out there pushing this thing to the voters and saying, here's the program. And I'm not getting that sense, and that's a real disappointment. Because you're missing the message of what we're trying to do here. Read the ballot language. It's about fixing the roads. Everything's been stripped out. There's citizen oversight, and it's for an amount that we believe the citizens who are voting would say, you know, Mayor, I'm trying to have a conversation